Hello, everybody, and good morning. Thank you for joining me once again here today. We are going to talk a little bit about organization. Now, you have just read 2 chapters. I know they might be a little bit long, but hopefully they were really applicable, lots of good practical information. And you have just created an outline. So you have already begun organizing your speech. This is the first time I've had you write an outline for this class. Before we've just sort of spoken from whatever notes you might have or naturally prepare for yourself. But these were a little bit more formal. And I'm guessing that if you've ever had a formal speech before of any kind, you've probably created some kind of outline, some kind of notes, maybe a manuscript for yourself, maybe a really detailed outline, but you've probably created something that looked like this, a Word document, lots and lots of words on it, pages and pages, organized a bit like paper. Sound familiar? That's okay, because what you have created here is a preparation outline. But when we're talking about extemporaneous speaking, that higher level, more excellent American cultural version of exceptional public speaking, it's important to remember that the first outline is never the final. You absolutely have to start with a preparation outline. You have to figure out what you're going to say and what sources you need and bullet points and all of those things. But that should never be the final outline that you use. After you have created a solid preparation outline, then you transform that into your presentation or speaker notes. So we're going to talk about those 2 categories of notes today. We're going to talk a little bit about how to create effective notes to increase your presentational speaking, to help you with your extemporaneous delivery. We're going to talk a little bit about how to do that today. So you have likely in front of you got something that looks a little bit like this. If you want to go ahead and pull that up in another tab, take a look at it if you've got it printed out. But you probably have preparation notes of some kind. If you followed the textbook's outline, you'll have a main topic and then main point 1 and subtopic and smaller points and smaller points. You'll have evidence, you'll have sources, you'll maybe have different types of appeals, anecdotes, narratives, reminders about transition statements, and it's all very detailed. Let me ask you a question. Imagine standing up and giving the speech with that thing in front of you, that ponderous, long Word document or Google Doc full of words. How much time are you going to spend looking at the audience? If you get even the slightest bit nervous, what are you going to look at? Now you begin to see the problem. You have made great preparation notes, but if you use them for speaking, you'll never move to that place of exceptional connecting with the audience. Instead, you're going to transform those preparation notes. When we're talking about speaking notes for an extemporaneous introduction, they must be exceptionally brief because you want to make 90% eye contact with your audience, and they should be interesting, never ever a boring checklist. So what does this mean? Think about your introduction. Is it currently maybe 45 seconds to a minute? That means you cannot look at your notes for any more than 5 or at max 6 seconds during that entire minute. Less than 10 seconds of looking at your notes. That means almost all of your time needs to be looking at the audience, making a connection with the audience. Remember, extemporaneous speaking is about audience connection. If you have a lot written down on your introductory speaking notes, you're going to look at it. It's when our nerves are the highest in any speaking situation. You're going to want that safety blankie. And it's going to cost you. It's going to cost you credibility. It's going to cost you connection. It's going to cost you trustworthiness with your audience. Now, a good introduction does some things, and as I go through these, you'll notice you don't really need notes to do a lot of these. You need to make sure you have an introduction that grabs the specific attention of your audience. Not just people generally think it's interesting that, but the specific people in the room. How are you going to gain their attention? What do they care about? This is going to be different if you're speaking at Young Life than it is if you're with your sorority. It's going to be different if you are giving a presentation to students just starting college than it is people looking at colleges. How are you going to get the attention of these specific audience members? A good introduction makes a clear statement about what the audience will hear. Think about your classes, the ones that you're really prepared for. When you go in and you've done the reading and you feel just super duper prepared for your discussion class. It's a better class than the ones where you sort of maybe forgot a couple things, right? That preparation is also good for your audience. Let them know what they're about to hear. Prime them for why they should listen to you, what's interesting, what's going to be meaningful, and what they'll hear. Then you need to establish that the topic is important and you are a credible speaker on that topic. Now this can be done, these don't have to be done as a boring checklist, remember? These could be done all together. A really interesting story about my life might do all of these things. A promise of what learning this material could do for somebody who learns it might do all of these things. But the final thing is perhaps the most important and the one that people most often forget. This is one of those things that separates novice speakers from truly exceptional speakers. So I really want you to focus on this thing. A good introduction previews its main points. Now, I've heard people say for years and years, but I don't want to ruin the surprise of my speech. Let me propose the question to you a little bit differently. Imagine you had to go to class, and you never knew how long class would be, what it would be about, who was teaching it, or what would be evaluated and graded. You had to go to class, and sometimes it was history class, and it was graded on the reading. And sometimes it was a 45-minute math lecture, and it was graded on the problem set that you may or may not have turned in. And sometimes it was taught by this professor, sometimes by that professor. And sometimes it was taught for 3.5 hours only once a week, and you didn't know when that would be, but you just had to stay sitting there. Would that make you like and anticipate that class? I'm going to go with probably not. It's the same thing for our audiences when we're speaking. They want to know what to expect. They want to know what you're going to do so that you're better able to connect with them. Next, let's talk about the body of your speech. Presentation notes for organizing the content should not be organized as a bulleted list. I don't want to see bullet points and ordered lists with every single main point and subpoint and sub-subpoint and minor subpoint and all the points. No, don't do that. Because that encourages you to present a bunch of bullet points. If I wanted to read bullet points, I also have the internet. I carry Google around in my pocket just like you. If I wanted to just Google this and read a bulleted list, I could. I want to hear what you have to say. Tell me the story of this content. Organize this in some kind of way that draws my interest. Organize it around the important sources that you want me to understand and engage with. Take me as an audience member on a journey. And organize your notes to do that. You have all the material. You have all the different topical and categorical and chronological organizational patterns. But organize your notes so that you're taking me on a journey and telling me a story. Again, only as much information as you at very minimum need. Keep your notes to an absolute minimum and no full sentences unless you're directly quoting something. But focus on taking me on a journey. And then finally, extemporaneous speaking notes for a conclusion. You need to review and summarize the takeaway of your speech. Don't focus here on persuasion. Whether you're speaking informatively, persuasively, or some other kind of way, this is not the place to persuade me. If you have not yet convinced me of something, you're not going to do it in the last 30 seconds of your speech. Think about professors shouting out, "Let's remember to do it," at the end of a class. Do you actually remember and engage with that material? Or are you packing up your backpack and headed out the door? No persuasion comes at the end of your speech. This is the time to review and summarize your points, know your clincher, and finish strong. So let me give you just one example of how I might do this if I was giving a speech. If I was going to give a speech, let's say, about how schools should change, I might start off by telling you my own personal story. My name is Dr. Meredith Styer, and I couldn't read until I was in the 5th grade. Yes, you heard that right, 5th grade. I was 12 years old before I was able to read. Now, my PhD says that I'm probably not so stupid. And my ability to read now says that I eventually learned. So what exactly was the problem? Well, today I'm going to tell you a little bit about what it's like to have a learning disability that's undiagnosed. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about what it's like to learn to overcome that thing the world calls a disability, before finally talking a little bit about why I think being dyslexic is actually pretty cool. That's how I'd start my introduction, folks. Then I'd tell you my story, include some research that supported my points, and I would finish strong. So today I'd like to encourage you that if you're having trouble with something, if you're struggling the way I was when I still couldn't read in the 4th grade, continue working on what works for you. Learn how you learn, and come to see the absolute beauty and brilliance of your particular mind. Thank you so much for joining me today. So think about these things, story, narrative, and very short notes as you move forward with our activities and work today. I cannot wait to hear your practice informative speeches. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.